Black Hills Information Security, the leaders in penetration testing and active defense. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to request a quote today. Threat Connect is the industry's most widely adopted threat intelligence platform. Built to unite the people, processes, and technologies across your security team, your organization, and your entire ecosystem of partners. Threat Connect's threat intelligence platform enables your team to collaborate, analyze, and make sense of threat data all in one place. Empower your team towards fast and efficient analysis that leads to decisive action. Transform your entire threat detection and response program today. Claim your free account at threatconnect.com/securityweekly. Faraday is an open source collaborative pen test and vulnerability management platform. With real-time dashboards and more than 50 tools, Faraday allows seamless integration with your security workflow, allowing CISOs and pen testers to see in real time the impact and risks uncovered from assessments. Scan your network every day using different tools and get one-click reports, creating a collaborative experience, sharing knowledge, and making pen testing fun again. This is Faraday. Visit faradaysec.com for more information.
Names.
Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. The show has just gone completely downhill because we have a Slack channel now for Security Weekly.
With Giphy integration.
Which would never, ever be public because it's just wrong.
I don't know. Is Slack going to break Security Weekly, or is Security Weekly going to break Slack?
I don't know.
Way.
There's this.
Look at that one. Look at that one.
Good Lord.
Vintage.
Wow. Vintage. So we're going to talk about Odroid C2 compared to Raspberry Pi 3, and it is going to be the absolute nerdiest conversation.
And you know what? I'm interested to hear this because I have been it's been recommended to me to pick up some Odroids and play with them.
Oh, you haven't played with an Odroid yet?
I have not had the opportunity to.
Oh, dude, it's so awesome.
And
it's so awesome. So the Odroid is kind of like a Raspberry Pi on steroids, right? Is that am I accurate in that assessment?
Yeah.
Job,
Yeah,
Carlos.
I
Carlos,
actually
have you
have
played with an Odroid and a Raspberry Pi, right?
Yep. I have one quad core, 2 gigs with solid state memory. I don't have the one that uses CSD.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is the Pi 3 a quad core? It's 1.2 gigahertz, whereas is a dual core. Yep. So the Odroid is a 2 gigahertz quad core. It has double the RAM, so it's 2 gigs of RAM, whereas the Pi 3 has 1 gig. The other major difference performance-wise is the Ethernet. Pi 3 has 10100. The Odroid has gigabit Ethernet.
And I will say I've done some playing with this. The Odroid's USB bus seems to be much more stable and faster.
Interesting.
And one of the other things that I'll say that when you talk USB bus, some of the older Raspberry Pis USB power was always an issue, in that you had to supply power to these things in crazy amount of amperage.
I gotcha.
To have USB function.
That's true. And actually, interesting thing on that, Larry, if you've ever measured that, I actually had to measure that with a special project I was doing. And I found out that if you, first of all, load up a Raspberry Pi with 4 Bluetooth adapters and 4 Wi-Fi adapters, you could pull 6,000 watts, or at least not 6,000, 6 watts, 6,000 milliwatts.
Yeah.
But you can, guess what? The Pi will fall over and not supply that current to you.
Oh, hell no.
Well, yeah.
Hell no. Yeah,
well, the Pi 3 has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi? Not
does.
Wi-Fi, though. Is it Wi-Fi and Bluetooth? I should know this.
It has both.
It has both, right?
I
But
believe it has both.
Actually, my point is that's really fuzzy math. If you start to measure the current draw of a lot of USB devices, they way exceed the spec.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's
so
even...
what's the advantage of the SD card slot versus the eMMC? I started to research this week, and I want to defer to the panel. What's the major differences between the eMMC, which the Pi 3 doesn't have, but the Odroid does have?
So my understanding is performance largely.
Yeah.
Is eMMC better performance?
Yes.
That's kind of what I was reading about, but I was unable to really get some good statistics.
I get a
as to how
dumb question
much.
because I haven't used the Odroid. What exactly is an eMMC slot? Is it the same format as an SD, or is it something completely different?
Actually, it's not a slot to my knowledge, unless the later Odroids have them. It's actually on board.
It's a board that
Yeah,
you.
you actually clip it on board.
Yeah.
in
Okay.
case of mine.
So for me, we talk advantage about speed. My advantage would be I don't have any of those, and I have shit tons of SD cards,
Right.
and micro SD cards, and for me that's an advantage now that given that I don't have to go and invest in additional
You
stuff.
do get it depends on what you. I think really the difference is performance.
Agreed.
Right? If you
Agreed.
need something with in my testing, which is very unscientific, I've been testing out some different things on Raspberry Pi and Odroid, and like RetroPie runs pretty good on a Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
I think when you get to Kodi, which is now it's not a security show anymore, just pretend it's a technology show for basically people that want to pirate TV shows and movies.
But we'll tie some Pi stuff into some security stuff.
Yeah, but so the advantage I noticed, I thought that the Odroid performance was when you run these types of applications that do video. So when you apply this to your security projects or network projects or any other kind of project, the Odroid was significantly faster. And obviously that's due to the processor, RAM, as well as the Ethernet might be a factor, but probably not so much. But I think the video support as well is much better on the Odroid. So
Yeah, it's a better board all the way around, in my opinion. It's got better specs. But now I don't know the more recent Odroids, whether they've changed. I've got one that's a little bit older, and it's in its case here. But
do you have a C1 or a C2, Joff?
You know what? I'm even trying to remember.
Because the specs I'm listing, I should qualify that is a C2.
Too. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
This
is the
one's
same
got
form
got
factor as
fan on
a
the
C1.
heatsink. Does yours have a fan on the heatsink?
Mine does not have a fan.
Yeah, this actually is. They actually had a cooling problem, so it must be a C1. And they
Okay.
put the fan on the heatsink with this guy. Or this is the. Wasn't there an XU?
There was different models. Yeah.
Yeah, I had, maybe this could be one of the XU models. It's been a little while, to be honest, which is
Gotcha.
sad of me because I haven't dusted it off and dropped Tachyon net on it, which I really want to.
Yes.
And I'll get to. By the way, I'm going to do a DNS delegation model with Tachyon net, so it actually logs the actual DNS names that are being looked up on the same box.
Nice.
That's more
I like
to come
that.
with Tachyon
I like
next.
that. Yeah. So I think when you're looking at these boards, one of the things that actually was interesting, and it's very timely, Joff, that you mentioned some of the older Odroid stuff, where I wanted to discuss the latest revisions of all these boards. For me, I kind of looked at the Raspberry Pis as like a good hobby board if you're going to do some hobbyist type projects.
And now think about, and I want to interrupt real quick. Think about the evolution of what the Raspberry Pi was about. The Raspberry Pi was initially intended to be a very inexpensive computer that you could buy, plug into a TV, and plug a keyboard into, and get kids involved in programming.
Right. Basic stuff.
And it was like, whoa, we could do so much else with this because it runs Linux.
Yeah,
Put
it has
Linux
all
on all
kinds
the
of
things.
all kinds of connectors, right?
Yep.
Like you can buy the Cana kits that have all the breadboards that come with it. and-
Absolutely, Pi hats, and I have a stack of Pi stuff in my office that I haven't touched because, quite honestly, the stuff that I'm working on right now, and we need to get somebody on the show to talk about one of the things that we're working on, is all Raspberry Pi Model B pluses. The older stuff,
the older ones.
because for what we're doing, it is incredibly stable, and it actually doesn't work
Interesting.
well on the 2s or the 3s.
Interesting. So
And now, just if I could interject just for a second, I actually went back and looked up what I bought. I bought the XU4, which is the hottest Odroid that you can get. That's the octa-core model, which is just rocking. But it does have the fan on board
I gotcha.
to cool the CPU.
And
Yeah, I like things that are fanless for a lot of applications. What I found is, and I've built some computers to run the shows, and I find that fans get clogged. They're prone to failure, especially machines that have
That's
to
true.
run all the time.
Yep.
And having these smaller devices that don't have fans, and it tends to be a kind of dusty environment here. Well, I mean, we've done a lot of construction recently. So
Yeah.
I actually, so much
cigar smoke.
and cigar
Two
smoke.
words.
But I actually, so much so, I bought a little compressor
Yeah.
for like, I don't know, the whole package was like $80 or something to be able to blow out all the fans because they were so clogged. And we need stuff here that runs reliably, I think, for a lot of security applications.
Yep.
Jack, you talk about the PVS software that runs on a Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
So these are devices you can throw anywhere, and to have it run fanless, I think, is really important. What I wanted to underscore earlier was these are some of the latest iterations of both these fanless devices, and the Odroid C2 is the latest release. And that kit, and I link to it in the show notes, so make sure you check the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com. I link to an Amazon wish list where I put together, without keyboard, for $90 an Odroid C2. Now, a similar kit for the Raspberry Pi 3 is $50. And this is the kit that you and I talked about earlier on chat the other day, Larry. And the kits are the same. They basically come with the case, the power supply, and the board.
Wait, you said that was without keyboard?
That is without keyboard. $90.
No, there's a wireless Logitech keyboard that's $30 in that.
So add 30 to 90.
Wow.
Yeah, for the whole build. If you need a keyboard.
One of the interesting things, I'm not sure if this is the case with the Pi, but the Odroid the C2 series and the XU4 series, they will actually run Android operating system.
Yes.
If you're an Android developer or interested in that area,
Well,
which I think
that
is
was its
really
initial purpose, was to be a reference board.
Yeah. And nicely support Ubuntu. In the C2 case, they're advertising 16.04, which is a later version.
Now, what's interesting, what I did with my Odroid is I put it on Twitter, what I was trying to do with respects to Kodi, which is really just the latest version of XBMC.
Yep.
And I've been experimenting with Kodi. I put it on my Amazon Fire TV. I find the performance to just be kind of so-so. When I looked at the different distributions, there's OpenELEC and LibreELEC.
Okay.
Both are which basically Linux distributions that basically just boot right into Kodi. So today, LibreELEC has a distribution for the Odroid. I transfer that to my micro SD card.
Yep.
I booted it up,
and it's done.
magically I was in Kodi, and I started streaming movies, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, there's like no hiccups. There's no hesitation.
Do you remember what that used to take? We used to have to get an old computer out of the trash and a video output board and a hard drive and Now it's on this just about credit card size computers.
And I think that $90
$90
includes a 32 gig micro SD.
It did.
Yeah.
Yep, it did.
Yeah.
And a case.
The case is kind of interesting. It comes kind of like a bunch of Legos that you have to put together with no instructions.
Yep.
Which is, I thought it was kind of cool.
The most expensive part of the whole thing is the Odroid.
And it was what,
$60?
$60? It was $60, whereas the Raspberry Pi 3 Model B is $35 for just the board, roughly.
About $35.
So, Paul, could you talk a little bit more about Kodi? Because I had not heard of this, and it sounds really awesome.
So, do you remember XBMC?
Xbox Media
Center. It was so if you had like one of the original Xboxes, you could take, what was the game? There was a game with a software bug that essentially let you put custom software on the Xbox.
There was a couple of them.
There was a couple of them. I remember I had one, and John Duxton actually helped me do this with some of my old Xboxes.
I used to do mod chips.
Yeah, or you could do the mod chip, and you'd
We
put
used to do mod
Xbox
chips,
Media Center, and essentially what that lets you do is the primary reason I think people used XBMC was I set up a Samba share somewhere on the network with a bunch of movies, music, and pictures, and I could stream that through my TV. And at that time, several years ago, that was the best and most fastest solution. It had the best video codecs, and it worked flawlessly for streaming.
I will tell you that
videos.
That was the one piece of software that revolutionized the way I consume media.
So,
in that the first movie I ever watched on that was Lord of the Rings, the first Lord of the Rings movie, because we had acquired it from somewhere. I don't remember where. And the second time that I actually used it, we went to Blockbuster to rent. What's the one with Nicolas Cage when they go and they get the stuff out of the museum? National Treasure.
Yep.
And then we went to go to Blockbuster to rent National Treasure, and all 500 copies they had were out.
Wow.
So I went to Binary News Groups and I downloaded it, and I watched it an hour later.
You download from news groups or torrents. Now
you have to go to the news groups, baby, to fetch it.
Now you can. So Kodi is the next evolution of this. They've basically morphed it into it's, like I said, OpenELEC or LibreELEC is its own Linux distribution, or you can install it on your Amazon Fire Stick as an app, which is super easy. And this basically lets you stream movies from anywhere. and they've got it into. So you put these add-ons on it, and then the add-ons stream, and a lot of it is illegal. I will say I don't partake in any of that illegal activity.
That you would at least admit on air, anyways.
Exactly. And
Okay,
so
can it
basically, it lets you stream anything
Paul doesn't
from anywhere.
inhale, doesn't
Yes,
enjoy it.
exactly, exactly.
So let me ask
That's
a question.
Kind of cool.
Does it stream from iTunes?
Yeah, it supports.
Home share?
There are add-ons, and I think there's even some native support for AirPlay. So my thing at home was I'll get one of my Windows boxes that I already have, get iTunes, download all my iTunes content from it, enable AirPlay. Then Cody will be able to stream from AirPlay. It also has an app for Plex.
Yeah, AirPlay would not work for me because the machine that is serving the content would fall down playing content.
I gotcha.
Doing AirPlay.
So anyway, Cody is amazing. It's amazing. There was a thread on my Twitter feed.
Yeah,
you can go. Actually, some of the guys from Libre Elec, props to them. They responded to one of my threads actually and said, "No, we have an Odroid
version
distribution," and I installed that today. And I tell you
way
what,
better.
it's so much more responsive than the Fire TV. And the Fire TV is essentially a similar kind of hardware. I think it might be an Intel-based processor that Amazon's using in there. I have the Fire TV Gaming, which is actually a beefed up Fire TV. And it's kind of slow. I mean, it works, but it's kind of slow on the Fire TV. When I put it on this Odroid, I was like, oh my god.
Damn.
So now I start
Platform
thinking
matters.
about like applications. So our DNS and DHCP servers here in the studio are Raspberry Pi 3s. But now if I know I need something with a little more processing power,
you go to an
and I want to
Odroid.
spend the extra money, right? It's $50 versus $90. I want to spend a little extra money. I can have this Odroid platform, which, you know, as all of us, you know, hosts here on the show know, like there's always projects that we're thinking of to use this stuff for. So it's really, really cool hardware.
The distinguishing factor, I think, for me is Raspberry Pi is very good for hobbyists that don't have too much knowledge. But if you have the kind of knowledge that security community people have, and you want, you know, more power, basically, Odroid's a platform for you, I think.
And Jeff, I might argue a little differently about the Raspberry Pi thing in that when you start interacting with various hardware devices on the Pi, it gets relatively complex and can be lots of fun.
Well, the thing for me was the Raspberry Pis have, now the 3 is got some decent processor and RAM, includes all the wireless stuff.
Yep.
And for me, now it has applications for what we do kind of on the more networking side versus the hardware side. So I'm starting to use it for a lot more projects. I remember in years past, you know, people that work here were like, we can get a Raspberry Pi for this or that. And I look at the specs and I'm like, but now I'm looking at the specs and I'm like, you know, we're building this system that actually most of it will be here tomorrow to get all the content and all the monitors here in the studio. And the slideshows we're going to power with a Raspberry Pi 3 because it has, and I did some Google searches and they're like, oh yeah, you just install this software and you point it at a directory with images and it makes a slideshow. It's all supported on Raspberry Pi. Now, not only that, you can get specific distributions for your Raspberry Pi, or you can just put Raspbian on it, which is essentially Debian, and do whatever you want. So you can kind of pick and choose. If you're looking at a project, you may find like, hey, look, like I did today, like, hey, look, like Libre Alexa, they got a distribution to do coding, and that's really all I want to do with this box. So I'll use their distribution. And then when you start looking under the covers, it's really just Debian anyway. They're just customizing it for you. But
one more comment though here, well, not one more comment, but word to the wise on SD, particularly micro SD.
Yeah.
Some of the all micro SD is not made alike. There are different speeds and performances with micro SD.
Class 10,
I wanted you to mention that. Someone to mention that.
Yeah, well, there you go. I brought it out. So if you want to get the SD RAM, the SD little micro
Cards,
SD that is you know, of the higher performance, you will pay a little more, like a SanDisk Ultra or something like that. But
is it more than 10? I find that around $10 gets you a pretty decent 32 gig.
And I will say that I have some Raspberry Pi Model Bs, not the B pluses, in quote production, running off of SD card, not micro SD, that are not class 10. They're like class 3, and they work great if you're not heavily dependent on any disk I/O.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly the thing. You get I/O bound with these micro SDs, even if you're using a pretty good one. So you have to be cognizant of that. I tend to go for the higher quality ones. And the other thing to remember with micro SD in particular is these things are physically fragile.
Yes.
You will break them.
Yep.
So DD is your friend. Get
Yes, it
yourself
is.
a nice reader and DD those images and keep them somewhere
Yep.
else.
Think VMware snapshots, but with DD.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah, I've actually been testing the performance of my various like micro SD card readers. So you get the one that is the SD card, and you put it in the SD slot.
Yep.
And you see how long that takes, and then you put it on. And I do want to mention, PV is the command that you can put in between your reading and your writing. So you basically break up your DD commands into two different commands.
Interesting.
And you pipe it to PV, and PV gives you a performance output, like a status bar performance. And so like sometimes I've done the calculations, and I'm like, wow, that's going to take 48 hours. I'm like, that's bad. Okay, cancel that and go try a different USB dongle or a different SD card. And I'm like, oh, that's going to take 8 hours.
20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you definitely got to experiment with the different speeds of both your readers, your cards, and use that PV command. Google search for it. It'll give you all the syntax. I've been using Google.
Mental note, do not attempt to build Haskell on a B+. Yeah. It is a 24-hour operation.
Yeah. See, there's certain things that can take a lot longer. I'm using Google Keep to take notes and stuff. It's kind of like Evernote. And I've been putting some of my commands in there just to remember them as I discover things. And like
Google, not
Google
to
Keep is
derail
pretty
the
good.
conversation, but Google Keep is really handy, and the voice to text is
Interesting.
has been solid for me. It's
interesting.
It's, on my Android, it has replaced
one.
voice notes and S Note and the other things that I used.
And the reason I mention it here, Jack, is that you're going to have, when you do these embedded projects, you're going to have like lots of links and little resources to build. Like you gotta like where did I get that board? Where did I get that memory? What commands did I run to build it?
Yep.
What commands did I run to back it up? Like that kind of thing. I find I'm collecting a lot of little tidbits of information because the information is so sparse. Like, I had a tweet that pointed me to the forum posting where the guy who maintains LibreElec for the Odroid, right? So like I got to remember where all that stuff is so I can build it. So I found Google Keep has been very helpful in keeping tabs on it.
One of the combination I do that for that. Sorry, Jack, is the Evernote and Pinboard. So I used to use Delicious.
Yep.
And fuck Delicious.
Well, Google does that for you now. If you log in with your Google account, all your bookmarks are there, so they've replaced Delicious.
but
check out Google Keep. I find it really
Keep is
handy.
handy because it's got a handful of things that I used to use different things. It makes checklists really easy. So
And
it does a really quick checklist.
You can share them too, which is nice.
share
So I
them.
share them with the
It
guys
does-
all the time. I'm like, here's a to-do list. Here's a. Speaking of all this technology and how it's evolved and how I love these platforms now. Whereas before I would go to different embedded systems platforms that you've heard me talk about in the show in the past to run PFSense and all that stuff. I've really gone to Odroid and Raspberry Pi. So useful that each one of the guys that works here in production, I bought them their own Raspberry Pi. And I'm like, you guys, you do whatever projects you want on them. You should always have some project that you're doing with your Raspberry Pi. And if it works out and you get that in production and we're using it, we'll buy you another one to go do more projects. And it's become that useful for us.
Next up, buy them an RTL SDR to go along with their Pi.
Oh yeah, that is definitely a good thing, and it's relatively inexpensive too. And then you can get into GNU Radio and do all kinds of great stuff.
Yep.
Possibilities are endless. So I thought that was a good summary of kind of giving people an update as to the latest hardware out there for embedded. We've been doing embedded stuff for a long time.
Yep.
And for the first time, I'm really excited about these really smaller boards that I think have progressed to a level.
I would argue that these are outside of the realm of embedded hardware.
No, it's absolutely embedded hardware.
They are not embedded hardware.
It's like it's a computer.
They're PC. They're PC minus the monitor. It's this big box that you have under your desk that from years ago.
Another good one too is a Chrome box. I've been looking at those. Asus makes a Chrome box. Have you seen that?
I have not seen a Chrome box.
So
we've looked at the Nooks, and
it's
there's another
a
one
little
like
less
similar to
powered
it,
than some of the newer Nooks, and that's the Intel.
Yep.
We have a Nook here in the studio too. There's one of our servers, but the Chrome boxes are primarily made by Asus. And if you start looking at what you get for the $150 to $200, depending which model you choose for a Chrome box, and then you spec out what it would cost to build a system with the similar specs, it's kind of like half the cost to just go buy a Chrome box. It's
Yeah.
kinda,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get exactly what you want, but I'm like, that's like really cheap to do what I was trying to do
Yep.
with the one I was custom building for myself.
Here's my dilemma: is right now that we're fairly heavily divested in Apple products, and I have an Apple the Mac Mini
Yep.
that is old, and I made the mistake of upgrading it to the latest OS 10, and it's
I'm
You're
sorry.
suffering performance-wise. huh?
dog turd slow. But there's 3 things that this machine does. It rips DVDs to disk.
Yep.
It takes DVDs and converts them to iTunes
Makes
format.
legal backups.
Yes,
For
of my own library, of which I
legal.
contain discs that may happen to be stored at Netflix warehouse.
fair use. Fair use. Fair use.
And puts those into iTunes and then serves iTunes to Apple TVs. I don't want to update my Apple TVs. They're generation 2s, and I know the 3s or 4s are out, but like that's a chunk of money. That's a good amount of money. But the device that I use to serve that iTunes content is dog slow.
You might want to look at a Chrome box with Windows and
I was gonna
iTunes.
say.
Put your content on there. I mean, because you're only looking at, I mean, the highest end one is like $279 or something, and it's
And
for
that's-
$279, dude. It's fast.
And
like,
that's
it's gonna do what you need to do.
Way cheaper than a new Mac Mini.
Yes.
To do the same thing.
You know, back on the smaller devices that are somewhere between embedded and whatever, I had to order a new switched PDU. One of mine fried, and so and I discovered, you know, we won't get into brand names, but the company that I buy PDUs, you know, web managed PDUs from has a $17 box that's this big that you send your signal from your little pocket computer board, whatever. And instead of having to worry about relays that has 4 electrical outlets on it and 2 are normally off, 2 are normally on, and when it gets a signal, you tell it what it does to flip them. So you can now control high load household appliances, and you don't have to build that part of it. If
Right.
you can send a signal off a wire, which you ought to be able to figure out how to do, now there's this sub $20
There's
box.
probably a Python library for that.
Right. There's
Yeah.
a sub $20 box that will handle the electrical relay switching to handle it, and it's a company that makes switched PDUs, so they actually have. They're used to shock loads and stuff. So for $20, you can start kicking stuff off and on. That's you know, more than a 8-watt light bulb. You know, you can stuff with a load. And, I mean, and the rest of the ecosystem. That's just one example. There's this ecosystem of, I wonder if I could make it do this. And then you look around, it's like, oh, somebody built this, and like you said, there's a Python library
Right.
for that. And then if I spend another $30 on that and some wire, oh, holy shit! I never have to get up off of my fat ass.
Stuffs it with a load, huh, Jack?
Yeah.
With that,
Stuffs your fat
we're
ass
going to take a short break, come back, and talk about our stories for the week. When I do that, I get kids.
Wow, you stuff his fat ass with a load? What? Wow.
Hey, I